Hey folks, welcome to another edition of the Mental Health Podcast. I have with me somebody exciting, Nikhil Paul with me, and I can't wait for you guys to hear from him. Hey Nikhil, how are things with you?
Hey Sanjay, good to connect. I'm happy to be here, man.
All right. I like your energy,
That's the only thing I got going for me.
Interesting you say that. So many people today, they're sort of, struggling to find that, place where you start off with that sense of energy, right?
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I feel like that happens is like people have a lot of confusion regarding what does mental health mean, right? And, hence my question to you, what does mental health mean to Nikhil Paul?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so first of all, thank you again for having me. Yeah, so growing up in India and then coming to the US as an immigrant, I think you and I share similar backgrounds in some ways. It's funny that you mentioned my energy because in India, as you know, it's a very academically rigorous environment, and you have to be very sharp and smart and work very hard. And one of the things that I loved when I came here to this country was that they were rewarding me for my energy. So I was very social. I was very quote unquote confident, right? I was always wanting to go out and do things. I like public speaking, and nothing to say it's anything bad in India. It's just that you don't get recognized as much for things like that. But and this is connected to what mental health is. The first part of mental health is feeling validated at where you are, right? If people recognize you in your true authentic place and you feel accepted, because I was the kid who would like to get excited, who was always jumping around and being playful and being myself. When I felt like that was not only okay, but it was celebrated, like people be like, oh, wow, he's really good in front of the mic. Put him in front of more things. Let him do more student activities. Let him be a leader. What it gives you is confidence. And that confidence is a big part of my mental health, right? And it's not something... As you know, when you're a child, you don't have time to think about these things, and you're just kind of operating. But for me, a big part of my energy was connected to dancing. So I used to dance a lot growing up. I would do dance like Michael Jackson. And in fact, when I came to my high school here in the US, I brought Bollywood dancing into my high school. And like my white classmates had never seen Bollywood dancing. So but they loved it. And that changed my trajectory of my, I would say my high school and my life in a lot of ways, because I was like, oh, I could be myself, show who I was, and people would celebrate it, encourage and get excited by it. And that gave me the confidence to have, be more open to the world, right? To come from a place where you're excited and you're looking forward to. So that was my first understanding of mental health, this idea of being accepted at where you are and where you're coming from. But the other part of that is that you have to balance it, right? Mental health is not just about excitement and being confident. It's also about dealing with negative, intolerable emotions. So that's the other part that I'm learning, which is about being able to sit with really tough emotions and being able to, weather that storm and still work in a healthy way forward using those emotions. So it's both parts. It's being accepted and being confident, but also dealing with the tough emotions.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And, one part of recognition that I usually do in the beginning, which I forgot for this conversation, was to introduce who you are.
yeah, that would help.
And, add that sense of validation for people to sort of understand, where you are coming from and how they can resonate with you as well. So here you go. Here's your chance to give yourself an elevator pitch.
Get my elevator pitch. Okay. So I am a leadership team coach. So my background is in startups, and I built a couple of startups. But today, what I do now is I basically help executives and teams hit moonshot goals. And that's really where my bread and butter is. So I do coaching and training programs for leaders and teams and organizations to be in high performance. How do you kind of hit your ambitious goals? How do you make sure you're not fighting and there's no office politics? How do you work productively and efficiently? So the idea is that if you're trying to get people to change their mindsets, their processes, their behaviors, and their relationships, that takes time, right? And that was something I saw that I was naturally doing a little bit in my old job as, running a team and bringing people together. But I found I had a big knack for it because I would read books on it all the time. I was constantly teaching myself. So that's my new, this is what I've been doing for the past few years is I basically coach and train high performing teams and leaders.
Definitely. You mentioned a couple of things there, which I want to sort of dig into. When you say moonshot goals, what do you mean by that? Like, for people who don't understand, goal setting itself, like how do you sort of look at moonshot goals, and what is your sort of opinion on setting moonshot goals?
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. So, okay, so this is my personal theory on having a successful life, right? And this even kind of connects back to a mental health. For me, I think there's three things as human beings that we need. One is loving relationships. As human beings, we're social beings, and we need to be surrounded by people we love, people who love us, and people we love as well, right? That's family, friends, our partners. So that's a very important part of a successful life, in my opinion. The second part is you also need to have mindfulness, so presence. So a big part of being able to have a healthy mental life is being able to be fully present wherever you are, right? And that to me is another key component a lot of us don't do as well on, and we have to kind of work. That's the mindfulness aspect of it. So that's the second. The third part, and this is the part that's connected to what you're saying, which is goals. I think human beings come alive when they're pushing themselves to achieve something that's a little difficult. And a moonshot goal in the lexicon of organizations and teams is like kind of what it means. It's like going to the moon, right? So there's when JFK launched the space age in America in the 60s, some of our greatest technology and our innovations and our greatest advancements came in that time. And we were in the Cold War era, and there was a lot of kind of tension between the countries, but there was also this great ambitious effort of getting to the moon in less than a decade. And something about that basically it turns on a switch in our spirit. All of a sudden we're excited, we're in the right mode, and being what it does is it puts us into a state of flow. And a state of flow is one of the best parts of being a human being. And ever since our ancestors came, on the African savannah, like all of us working collectively together towards a goal, whether we can hunt down the gazelle for food, right? Or we're working on a very exciting project and launching a new product, right? There's something exciting about doing something and building something and getting there, because you don't know if you're going to make it. But the process of focusing and getting towards it and make that ambivalence and working towards that, it's tough. But when you actually get it, the neuroscience says that that's when the brain is the most alive. Like the brain loves achieving goals that it thinks are hard, but not too hard. And it makes you feel like you've accomplished something. So for me, that's what moonshot goals is about. Setting things that are hard, but challenging, but meaningful. And in the process, you find out who you are and you get to do some pretty cool stuff.
Interesting. And, I loved your answer. And and sometimes you're right. When you're in that state of flow, you stop noticing time. You stop noticing, things that are going around you. And and you don't need motivation to sort of, do certain things. And it almost feels like your body is in flux. And you're just sort of moving along.
Exactly. It's effortless. It's effortless, right? Yeah, exactly.
And, I think one thing that is coming of age, the process is coaching, which, a lot of people don't have access to, or like this is it comes off more from a sense of privilege to say, hey, you know what, I can have a coach to sort
Yeah,
of
yeah,
get
yeah.
me to where I need to be. And
Sure,
like for somebody who hasn't had a coach, like
sure.
what does coaching mean to you, and like how do you think sort of coaching can help an individual sort of to get to where they want to be? So,
Yeah, so coaching is basically about, how do I say it? It's about having an inspiring accountability buddy, right?
mhm,
Because
mhm,
the truth is, as human beings, we all are subject to our biases, like our cognitive biases, right?
mhm,
We we're very good at forgetting the bad parts
mhm,
in life, and that's a good coping mechanism. Because if we kept focusing on bad parts, we would never be able to move forward. But
mhm,
we need to be able to have a very objective view on our life, right?
mhm,
If you want to be successful in life,
mhm,
it basically requires two things. You
mhm,
need to be passionate.
mhm,
So you have to find a purpose, something that
mhm,
moves you deeply, because that's what's going to push you forward. That passion is what's going to drive courage. You're going to
mhm,
find courage from that. And the
mhm,
second part is you need to have balance.
mhm,
Okay, and balance is about being able to handle everything. Like, if you're working really hard late at night and you're sacrificing your health and your sleep and your
mhm,
relationship,
mhm,
yeah, you'll maybe working and producing a lot, but it's out of balance. And
mhm,
so then ultimately you'll burn out and then you won't be able to hit your goal.
mhm,
So a lot of life is about learning to have balance in your things as you kind of go for the big goals. And what
mhm,
balance helps you to get to is commitment. So
mhm,
those are the two outputs we want: courage and commitment. And I think a
mhm,
coach's best job is
mhm,
to help people find that courage
mhm.
and to help them be consistent and committed. That's
Definitely.
that point. So that's why I think you need, those are the two kind of fundamental principles you need to play if you're
Mhm.
trying to reach an ambitious goal or a moonshot project.
Definitely. Yeah. And thank you for highlighting the courage aspect. And I feel like a lot of people, give up because they think, hey, am I ambitious enough? Or am I thinking big enough? Or, is this idea even worth investing my time on? Right.
Yeah, yeah,
So these are questions that, people sort of have. And, coaching is something that can help those individuals. And
yeah.
like, bringing in this aspect of mental health as well, like, into coaching. So like, how do you start with somebody in terms of talking about it? And, how would you sort of go about, encouraging people to become sort of mentally aware and, help themselves along the process as well?
Yeah, so how would you kind of start building your mental health, right? So so for me, I would say there's so first things first, let's start with the big picture stuff, right?
Mhm,
Like a lot of times we're very stressed. It's not that we come in from a equilibrium. We're coming from very stressful environments, right?
mhm,
So it's three things, and I like this because I got this from a famous. He's a Hollywood therapist. His name is Phil Stutz, and he has a
mhm,
show on Netflix. And he says here three things. It's called a life force, and it's
mhm,
in retrospect when my startup failed and I was kind of in a low point in my life. I was feeling very down.
mhm,
I didn't realize this at the time, but now looking back, this is what I did. And these are the three things I think everyone should do to begin with to kind of
mhm,
get themselves out of the negative
mhm,
space, right?
mhm,
And the
mhm,
first thing is you have to start by getting in touch with your body. So
mhm,
that means exercising, that
mhm,
means sleeping well, that means eating well, right?
mhm,
Without the fuel and the rest,
mhm,
your body does not have time or space to recover and heal. And if the
mhm,
body's not able to heal, the
mhm,
mental space up there is not going to do its job. It's directly a reflection of your body. So how you treat your body. So in fact, Phil Stutz says that almost 80% of your life force, this like
mhm,
positive energy, comes from taking care of your body first. So
mhm,
if you're feeling like you're in a slump and you're feeling like you're down, start by
mhm,
going on a jog or go for a walk or play a sport that you get out of your own head. You know what I mean? And let your body get that good juju going through. That's the first part. The second
mhm,
part is, again, kind of connected to what I was saying about the relationship. It's connect with people,
mhm,
get out and meet other people.
mhm,
The more you meet other people and ask them questions and hear their stories, the
mhm,
more you get out of just me. I'm going through a
mhm,
tough time. What you
mhm,
realize is that everybody else is going through a tough time.
Right.
And that gives you perspective. You're just like,
Right.
okay, I'm not the only person doing that,
Yes.
right? So you
Definitely.
want to feel connected to humanity. And so get out and meet anybody, people you really like and connect with. And then the third part is journaling. You got to journal. And this was one of the biggest things I did because, again, in the aftermath of my startup failing, I had a lot of time on my hands and a lot of negative emotions brewing.
Right.
So
Right.
I could have gone either way, right? I could have gone into more addictive substances, or I could have gone into dysfunctional behaviors. But my mom is a social worker / therapist, and she was telling me about mindfulness, and she was telling me about CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and something in there struck a chord with me. And so what I started doing is I started journaling what I was feeling. And journaling is the best way to build a relationship with yourself. And that's the third most important part. A lot of times, the things that's going on in our head that we're feeling stressed, stress is not an emotion. Stress is a bundle of emotions that have been unresolved, and they become a cloud, and they just stay in the top of our head. So the way to think about it is like, think about unspooling a spaghetti from, right? That's what journaling and mindfulness is doing for us. You want to slow it down, slow your mind down, and then start writing down, what are you feeling? Why are you feeling that? And once you see it on a piece of paper, it gives you clarity. And that's the most powerful thing. You're able to separate yourself from the emotion and able to have some level of healthy perspective on it and say, okay, these are all the things that are stressing me out. And so that was the third most important thing I would say to connect with your mental health and start on that journey. Start journaling, start building a relationship with yourself, and start writing anything, everything. Just sit in front of that book every day for 10 minutes. I guarantee you things will start coming up.
Definitely. And, I think with the layoffs, I've seen people having, more time to themselves, or they seem to need to figure out how to be productive in sometimes and unproductive at sometimes as well. And, and there is this sense of struggle. And I understand when you said, this startup failed, and, you get into that negative space. And I feel like today, when people are applying for new jobs and you don't hear back, or you get rejections, right? It tends to put that sense of negative impact on you, and sort of being able to sort of deal with and comprehend, everything that is going on with you. And I love that aspect of journaling as well, because I feel like at times our minds are running so fast, and you kind of struggle having so many thoughts in your mind and not being able to sort of either take in anything, or take away something from it, from that standpoint as well.
That's right.
And I know you work with a lot of the high performers, right? So I'm just trying to understand, how do you sort of develop that mindset, right, of becoming a high performer? And what does focus look for them from a high performing standpoint as well?
Yeah. So this is connected to the other thing I was saying in the end, which is starts with the journaling, right? So one of the biggest things I've learned is that mindset is one of the most powerful things you can do, because if you can connect and feel reconnected to your mind and come from a place of strength, it changes everything, right? Because it's the lens with which we view the world. So I believe that 3 things we need to do to build a strong mindset. First, you want to forge a strong identity every day. So identity drives behavior. It's one of the biggest lessons I learned from this book, Atomic Habits. And the guys, it's a great book by James Clear. And he basically says that, a lot of times when we're starting a new habit or we're trying to do something new, we're focused on the outcome. And that, I want to lose weight, so I'm going to go to the gym every day, right? But the problem with that kind of behavior, new behavior, is that it's based on how motivated we're feeling on that day.
Right. Definitely.
Right. So it's very hard to motivate yourself on some days. But if you flip the script and say, okay, let's start by saying, who am I? What's my identity? And if you say, actually, I am a fit, athletic person. That's who I am. Right now, I'm just kind of let myself loose, but I'm a very fit athletic person. Then you say, okay, if I'm a fit athletic person, then what should a fit athletic person do? Well, I guess I should probably go to the gym more often. Okay,
Right.
that drives. So when your identity is very strong, your actions naturally reflect what you believe about yourself. And that's the first most important thing I say to start doing is with the journaling, write down the life you want to live and the world you want to create. Start changing that up, because the thing you learn about from neuroscience is that the brain is very malleable. So you can train the brain to believe anything. You know, they've done like studies on this where they've looked at people visual cortex in the brain, and the visual cortex lights up when we're looking at something, and it lights up exact same when we're imagining something. So to the brain, it doesn't know the difference between reality and what's in our head.
Right.
That's how powerful it is. Because so if you keep writing a story about yourself and you say, this is who I want to be, this is what I want to see. You look at some of the best top performers, they athletes or actors, they envision it, right? And they visualize it. That power of visualization helps you connect back to your identity. This is who I'm going to become. This is what I'm trying to do. And then your actions naturally reflect that. So that's the first thing I always say. Get up in the morning and write down in detail who you're trying to become, what you're trying to do, you know, or find mantras that you really like. Like this is who I am. I'm a rock star mom who kicks butts and signs deals. Find something that helps you reconnect with your core identity and start there. Start the day having a clear sense of who you are and what you're going to do. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, this is what I do. So once I've done journaling that part and I got myself excited, the second thing I do is I do meditation. So meditation is very important. If you can do even 1 minute a day, again, back to this idea of emotions and feeling, it quietens our brain, right? So meditate, quieten the brain down. Once I quieten my brain down, I do 2 other activities. And basically what I do is I do gratefulness, a couple of things I'm very grateful about. So sometimes I'll wake up in the morning, I'll make my coffee and I'll smell the coffee beans. And I just love the smell of fresh coffee beans. And to me, I'm grateful for that. Or I look at my daughter and I'll just feel it. And just staying in that moment. Gratefulness is at the heart of every prayer, if you think about it. And that's what you're doing. By saying you're grateful, you're saying you're joyful to be in this world and you're reconnecting with that. So being grateful. And then the last part is self-love. Now, this is the part most people don't do much of, especially immigrants, from our developing nations. Like our cultures didn't speak to this as much, but it is highly, highly critical that you take the time to love yourself. And this sounds very wishy-washy, but the best way I explain it is like this. Let's say you have a kid and the kid has failed an exam, right? You could shout at them, you could scold them, but you know that doesn't make them feel good. Instead, what do we usually do? We tell them, no, you did a great job. You tried hard, you worked hard, you're amazing, you're amazing. Now, imagine if that kid was you. What would you tell yourself? Right? And that's the toughest part. Most of us don't know how to say, oh, you're amazing. You're doing a great job, right? You're worthy of being loved, not because you achieved great things or you did those things, but because you are you. So for me, it's very important that I write down that I love myself the most, because the more I feel that I accept who I am and my bad parts, the things I'm shameful about, and kind of, again, writing it down and working through those, the more confident I come across in the world. So those are the 3 things I try to do after doing my visualization identity: is meditation, gratefulness, and self-love. So that's my practice every day. And then the last part of that, which I also do at the bottom of it, the third big part, is I write down, I do basically tackle my intolerable emotions. So how do working through when I'm feeling really low or I'm feeling very strong negative emotion, I journal that too. So that's the 3 kind of big areas.
Definitely. I mean, I've never seen prayer sort of explained from a standpoint saying, you're being grateful, right? But prayer gets so convoluted in terms of who you're praying to,
right?
What you are sort of trying to get out of it, right? And why are you doing it? right? And
Yeah,
so it just gets so convoluted in
that's
terms of
right.
the practice itself. And
Yeah,
and I felt like, if people were to say, hey, this is the way you're showing gratitude for everything
yeah,
that you have, that
yeah,
you don't take it for granted, and you
that's
you
right.
make sure that you are showing that gratitude in different ways,
Yeah,
and that was just amazing and mind blowing
yeah,
from that standpoint.
that is right.
And the other thing that you mentioned in terms of like self love, right? I mean, like, I think this is something that people struggle specifically because, for one, uh, for one, you don't see parents saying that enough, that they love you, or they show you in different ways,
Yeah, yeah,
especially
yeah,
from the immigrant
yeah,
families and the
that's
communities
right.
that you come from. So, like, how do people sort of get started, right? I mean, with this awkwardness of like saying, hey,
Yeah, it's so.
with this awkwardness of saying, hey, you know what, I love whatever, right? I
Yeah,
love
yeah,
you,
yeah, yeah,
I love
yeah,
your parent, or like,
right, right.
can you talk a little bit about how you
Yeah,
started that?
yeah, yeah. So it is awkward, man. Especially, Desis, we're not like it's not that obviously our parents and our communities, people love like
Right,
Indian community, Asian community, immigrant, we're very family built, very
right,
community driven. So obviously there's a lot of love there.
right,
What I'm specifically saying is the act of expressing
right,
love externally.
right,
Because what they found out is that as human beings, we need to feel heard and seen. We need to feel validated, right?
right, right.
So that same concept I was saying in the beginning, I want people to say, "Oh, you're awesome" and whatnot. And the person who can give it to you the most in the beginning is your parents, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's our role model. So if they don't directly do that, then we don't know how to do that to other people around us. So, funny enough, my dad and I don't think we said love you. Like it's this is more of a cultural thing. But like
Mm-hmm.
in India, I don't remember growing up saying love you, bye. It was more like, okay, see you, bye, chalo, bye.
Right.
But here, after coming to the US now in the past
Mhm,
20 years, my parents have
mhm.
changed.
Right.
Now I regularly find myself saying to my dad, love you,
Mhm,
which if I think about it, even 10 years ago, what he would have been like, what does that mean?
mhm.
so, so
Definitely.
there is a cultural difference. But the point is this: how do you do this? It's hard to like. I don't. People are not. It ultimately comes down to vulnerability. Do
Mhm,
you want to be vulnerable?
mhm,
The power of vulnerability is that you are not pretending to be anybody else.
mhm,
If you are truly vulnerable, people know you directly. You're like, that's a person I really connect with. I know who that person of the inside out.
mhm,
And that people trust you, people love you, people begin to want to be closer to you because vulnerability takes a lot of courage to
mhm,
be vulnerable because people can shut you down.
mhm,
Um, but the power of vulnerability is that then you have confidence. Then you do things that only you want to do and you
mhm,
move through that area.
mhm,
So for me, unless you realize the power of vulnerability,
mhm,
it's hard for you to change your thing, right? If you grew up in a
mhm,
place where you guard your emotions and you don't try to, because
mhm,
what are you doing? You're afraid that you might get rejected,
mhm,
right? You don't show your true self because someone might put you down or make
mhm,
fun of you.
mhm,
So the first thing I actually, with my daughter, when she's a baby, she's only 10 weeks old. The
mhm,
thing I say, and this is kind of a joke I kind of say, is like, daddy loves you a lot, mommy loves you a lot, but who loved you the most?
mhm,
You love yourself the most.
mhm,
Nobody else is going to love you as much as you love yourself. And that's
mhm,
the biggest truth we have to understand. Nobody will love us as much as we love ourselves. And
mhm,
in fact, how can someone love us anymore
mhm.
if we don't even love ourselves that much? Like, you know what I mean? If I'm like, Sanjay, you're
Right.
an amazing guy, dude, why are you
Right.
not? But you're like, I don't believe that.
Right.
So why should I believe you?
Right.
Right. And so that's why I kind of come back to it. If you are your biggest proponent, your backer, your cheerleader,
Mhm.
then everything else slowly starts opening up. Then you're more authentic and more in place. And that's a you have to it's a mental habit you have to start building. You have to look in the
Right.
mirror and slowly
Right.
start awkwardly. I love
Right.
this guy. I love this person.
Right.
Or
Definitely.
writing it down in a journal. That's how you have to build that habit.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, like, and this I learned through the conversations I had with therapists. And like the first time I did it, it was so awkward. I just went and stood, stood in front of the mirror, and she said, "Place a hand on your heart and say, I love yourself." And I'm like, "Wait, what? Like, this doesn't make sense to me. Like, like, I, and
Oh man,
it
that's so true.
and it was so hard, and
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
the first time I did it, almost like tears started flowing down like in my
yeah.
eyes,
Of
and I'm
course.
like,
Yeah,
and I'm like,
that's right.
wow, it's like, this is just mind blowing when I sort
Yeah,
of see, myself not being able to say this out loud,
right.
and
That's
it's
right.
that struggle, and
That's
it's
right.
that struggle, and you mentioned an interesting part there in terms of trust, and like trust is something that's hard to sort of get, and it's
Yeah.
so easy to lose, right?
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
and in terms of like your own sort of experience in terms of connecting with people, or like from the coaching standpoint, how do you sort of build that sense of trust, and like even trust and faith in yourself as well? So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's two different things, right? How do I build trust with other people? So this is something I learned a lot as a young kid because, again, people would say growing up, something like, "You're so sensitive. You're so
Right,
overly
right.
sensitive." Something I would say. But what sensitivity does is that I can immediately sense how
Hmm.
other people are kind of feeling, right? So
Hmm.
that's the pros of my kind of knack.
Hmm.
And one of the things I realized as I was getting older was that, but going back to the thing, if I am vulnerable and I immediately open my mouth and say something like, "Oh, I think I'm struggling with this" or whatnot,
Hmm.
immediately I noticed the tension or the uncomfort kind of goes down a little bit. People are like, "Oh, this guy's a little bit more real. He
Hmm.
didn't come in with posturing and big bravado and like, oh, I
Hmm.
got to do this," and like, you know,
Hmm.
he he came in, and I realized that it was more like an intuitive thing. I started noticing if I came in and I just immediately was like, "Wow, I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable. I don't know if I'm as good looking as the people in this room," or something like that, as a joke, right?
Hmm.
And it's always kind of a little bit of a joking thing, right? Because you're trying to not be also pertinent to the room. So it immediately people are like, "Oh, this guy's kind of cool." It's like he's not pretentious. So
Hmm.
that's the way to build trust in the beginning, is to be vulnerable and own up. And that's what I even teach in my teams with
Hmm.
leaders, is if you want to build trust in your teams,
Hmm.
start by owning up to your faults, your failures, your fears.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
more you share how you're feeling, the
Hmm.
more safe people in your team will feel to share their faults and their failures. And that's how you build trust. That's how
Definitely.
they're like, this is a safe space for me to be who I am. So
Hmm.
that's the first part in building trust with others.
Hmm.
To build trust in yourself,
Hmm.
which is to have faith in yourself,
Hmm.
you have to just start doing things, right?
Hmm.
I think the problem sometimes with, and again, I'm connecting it back to the mental health, is that if you overthink things too much,
Hmm.
it's going to be, you're never going to act on it.
Hmm.
But if you just get up and start doing something and just keep repeating doing it,
Hmm.
after a while, the brain gets used to that. And the brain says, "Oh, this looked very hard to run that first mile.
Hmm.
And it is hard, but
Hmm.
it's not as hard as I thought it was before I started." And that's what you
Definitely.
realize. The brain
Hmm.
normalizes stress and tension and fear. It like immediately is like, "Oh, this is okay. Let's find
Hmm.
something else to worry about." And
Hmm.
so the only way to have more faith in yourself is to
Hmm.
prove it to yourself by doing the action,
Hmm.
right? If you do something day in and day out,
Hmm.
then you are that person. Whether or not you're successful or not is another thing, but like, it's still, you've built the muscle memory
Hmm.
of doing that thing. So the consistency of doing something gives you the confidence in yourself that
Hmm.
you are that person. You show up to the gym
Hmm.
after 20 times, you're like, "Yeah, I am the guy who kind of goes to the gym. That's just who I am." Because the
Hmm.
body is now getting used to the reps. And that's
Hmm.
true with anything in life. The more you do it, the more you become it.
Definitely. And I was reflecting when you were saying, be uncomfortable, and like even when I was trying to reach out to you, I didn't know who you were. I didn't know how to pitch my idea to you. I didn't
Sure,
know
sure.
how to sort of showcase and highlight that
Yeah,
this is my intention
right,
towards sort of building and having this conversation.
right,
And
right.
like to date, I'm still wondering, like, what did I say that sort of
Oh, I'll
sort
tell
of
you.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I mean, in fact, it's very apparent, right? You're authentic.
Hmm.
It takes authenticity. Say, "Hey, this is what I'm doing. Here's where I'm starting. This is what I'm trying to do." You put it all out there. What you did is a blueprint in
Hmm.
how people connect and build things. You
Hmm.
put yourself out there. You say you're going to do something because that's scary. You
Hmm.
say what you failed at, or how I'm starting at this area. You might get rejected. All of those things could be true, but you
Hmm.
still put yourself out there. You still took a chance. Now, in this case with me, I resonated, I connect with. But maybe 9 times out of 10, maybe wouldn't have. But that's not going to stop you. And the more you keep doing it, the more people who like you and connect with, because not everyone's going to understand you or connect with you in the same way,
Definitely.
which is okay. That's
Yes.
You're not everyone's cup of tea. But
Right.
for the people of your own tribe, they're out there, right? We connect with people. Like, we only want to be, ultimately as human beings, we only want to be with people who we like and trust, right? So when you put yourself out there, very bearing your heart and putting yourself out in the best way possible and eager to, with energy and excitement, I'm telling you, it changes things in people. People are like, oh, I like that guy. That's somebody who's trying.
Definitely. You know, in order to be more inclusive, I'm asking people, you know, some of their own sort of things that they like to say to themselves when you are like feeling. I know you mentioned journaling, but like sometime during the day when you're like, you know, totally like overwhelmed, like,
Yeah.
is there something that you say to yourself, or is there something that you do specifically at times when you are at the limit, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, any insights you can share from that
Yeah,
standpoint?
so I'll tell you something I do. It's part of my journey into kind of what I realized is that, again, I was telling you, right? Like when I was running a startup and I was doing things, I would do things like what you were doing, reaching out to potential clients and reaching out to big potential clients, vice presidents or CEOs of big tech companies or big companies, corporations. It's very scary because you don't know if they're going to say yes to you. You're a small person, right? You're a small person. So what that would lead me to do is some days I would feel very courageous, but some days I would not. And so some days I wouldn't do that much good work, right? And that was inconsistent. So we're going back to that thing. If I'm trying to be good, if I'm trying to have success in life, it's all about being consistent. The only way to be consistent is to move through the intolerable emotion. So one of the things that I do is I have a chart here. I have like a small notebook, and I can show it to you, but I guess your audience won't be able to see it as well. But I basically chart 4 emotions that I found were the most disruptive emotions for me. One is laziness. The other one is fear. The other one is distraction. and the last one is frustration. And on any given day, any of those 4 things could derail my entire day, right? So like if I want to go on YouTube and look up some YouTube videos, that's a distraction. I'm feeling bored, right? So if I feel that emotion, what I do is I'll just give myself a point. I'll just make a mark and say that was a distraction, and I collect that point. If I'm feeling very afraid, like if I'm going to reach out to a client that I'm very afraid, or I'm about to have a conversation that I'm nervous about, I'll give myself a courage point. And what I do is I take all these points at the end of the month, and it converts to a dollar amount, and then I go out and buy something with the dollar amount.
Interesting. Wow.
So I gamified it. So I made my emotions, negative emotions, into a game. And what that's ultimately doing is it's retraining my brain. So now every time I'm seeing something I'm afraid of, I'm actually kind of attracted towards it. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I can get that point, and I'm not as afraid, right? Like you're retraining your brain. So that's the way to do it. Make it a game. Give yourself a point every time you feel a strong negative emotion, and then give yourself a reward at the end of the month or week or whatever. So yeah, that's one way.
That's just amazing. And you know, thank you for
sure.
And you know, one also other thing that I'm asking is like, is there something that you remember like from your own local language? I don't know what your local language is, but like, you know, that sort of resonates with you, or like when you hear that, it feels like, okay, you know what, I sort of get that sense of belief. I mean, if in not the local language, it could be in English, you know, one dialogue, one statement, one tagline, you know, which says, hey, you know what, I sort of get going from that standpoint as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's so like this is one of those things that's like so narrow, and like it's only I would kind of fully understand it in some ways. But I was reading this article by this Henry Rollins is this author, and he's an activist as well. And he wrote this like very impassioned article about how the challenges of today's world are very enormous. Like there's climate change, there's racism, there's so many other big things going on. And he says, what we need now is a generation of infinitely fantastic people, human beings. And something about the way he said that, I liked it. Infinitely fantastic. You have to take it upon yourself to be an infinitely fantastic human being, because that's what the world requires right now. And something about the way he wrote that line I immediately connected with that. Be an infinitely well, how can I connect to being an infinitely fantastic person today? What is it going to take, right? And it's such a like an inscrutable, very specific statement that only I connected, right? It's a long essay, but I highlighted it, and I took that and I put that in my like list of mantras, and I look at, and that's one of the mantras I look at, which is what's it going to. I ask myself, what's it going to take for me to be an infinitely fantastic human being today? And infinite. Maybe the reason I connect with is maybe in some way it's connected to a spiritual, right? Like to the universe. Maybe it's connected to something deeper. And maybe that's why I love it. But who knows? All I know is that immediately it centers me. And I'm like, okay, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be the best version of myself for myself.
Definitely. And, what you said sort of resonated so hard because, today there is so much struggle and people don't know how to sort of engage with other people, and they're dealing with their own stuff, their own shit, right? And sometimes you don't have the bandwidth to sort of see what somebody else is dealing with, and I felt like trying to be just that little bit nicer, right? Like you mentioned,
that's right.
Just that infinitely more nicer, so that way for one it puts out that energy saying this is how I want to be treated.
That's right.
And this is my hope that I am treated this way because I am treating other people around me this way.
Right. That's right. That's exactly right.
And and thank you for highlighting that. And the last thing was like in terms of diversity and inclusion, right? Like this is something that that is a struggle that's happening, and it's still a work in progress, right?
Yes.
And like how do we sort of like improve, enhance? And what is your perspective on like improving inclusion, improving diversity, and like what can be some of our moonshot goals to sort of highlight and put out there as well?
Yeah, I mean, so it's very interesting, right? Like diversity and inclusion is absolutely critical because our customers are global. Like people are working in global teams, companies are global, cultures, everyone is mishing and mashing, right? And there's many ways to kind of slice this apple, but one of the ways I'll say for using the high performance teams things is that diverse teams are more stronger because the more diverse points of view you have, there's a thing in organizational theory called cognitive diversity. And what that means is that each of us comes to life, to a room with different set of values, learning, education, life experiences. We have a different way of solving problems. We have different, backgrounds. All of those different ways that we come to the table, that's all important. And what that happens is great leaders are able to bring all these different people together and get them to work well. Like but the moment they come together, there's a clash, there's a conflict because these are people coming from different things. So the greatest challenge we have to realize is that diversity doesn't immediately mean it's all cookies and sugar, right? Like it doesn't just mean like it's going to be amazing. What that actually means is that there's going to be a lot more conflict. Great leaders know how to channel and bring that energy and make it in a positive way. And the best example, an example of this I created a video on this one, is the Wu-Tang Clan. Have you ever heard of the hip hop group Wu-Tang Clan? So the Wu-Tang Clan is basically a group of rappers. They're actually Staten Island rappers. And the world of hip hop, like street rapping, they would battle rap each other. And it's very hostile in the way it's very aggressive, right? And a lot of these guys were, before they became this gang, this musical group, they were used to battle rap each other on the streets, and it was a very hostile. They didn't like each other. They had problems with each other. But Riza, the founder of this group, he recognized something. He recognized that each of them brought a different style of rapping. They had a different personality, and they had incredible talent. He said, if I could bring them all together, then blade sharpens blade. It makes things more stronger. And so what he realized was that you have to bring them together and said, hey, listen, you can compete with each other, bring that competition, but use it in a productive way. Try to get better than the other person's rap. And he channeled that aggressiveness into a more productive, creative outflow. And that to me is an example of diversity being used at its best. Bringing people from different places with strong opinions and different backgrounds and saying, okay, what can we create that's amazing and powerful out of this?
Definitely. Wow. Yeah. I mean, and I think, this is a great note to end the conversation because the energy in the answer was like amazing. Like,
Thanks.
but I'll just ask you, like, if there were a few things you want people to take away from this conversation, what would they be?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of what you said, right? I think the biggest thing I think about a lot is that it comes back to those three things again. Like, first, learn to love yourself. You have to learn to love yourself. If you can't love yourself, it's hard to do the confidence and to be in the world. You'll always kind of feel insecure and whatnot, right? The second is spend time being present with yourself. So like journal, understand what you're going through. What are the emotions, the intolerable emotions? Like make that a practice every day. And the third part, what I would say is like find something fun that's audacious to go after. Just go after something that's fun and audacious, because in the process of doing something that's difficult, human beings find the best versions of themselves. So if you can self-love yourself, spend time with your self and understand your emotions, and then finally go for the tough challenge and the big goals in life, I think somewhere within that, you'll find a life worth living.
Wow. Yeah. I'll just say wow and just, mic drop.
Mic drop. That's right. Thank you, Sanjay. I appreciate it.